Hi, I'm Scott Michaels, the Artistic Director of the Wagon Wheel Theater.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Dow. I am on the creative staff at the Wagon Wheel Theater, which means I do lots of different things. Like most not-for-profits, we all have to wear lots of hats, and I wear many of them.
Including being my wife. Today we're going to try to answer some of your questions about the Wagon Wheel Theater professional summer season, right?
Yes, and hopefully we got good answers for you.
So let's get to it. Welcome to Wagon Wheel Wednesdays, where today we will try to answer some of your questions that were sent to us via email, Instagram, and Facebook about the many things or the many facets of our Wagon Wheel professional summer season.
Okay, we've got a great question from Mayor Ted Denton. Hi, Scott. My question is one I'm sure anyone who saw the production of Singing in the Rain would want to know. But how did you do the rain scene just before intermission? The show was superb. Thank you, Mayor, for your question.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so actually I didn't do the rain at all. Our production director, Mike Higgins, the genius that he is, he created the special effect. We've done Singing in the Rain 3 times here. This is the 3rd time we've done it, and we've used the same rain system all 3 times. And what it is a series of PVC pipes that are rigged around the top of the theater, and then we have water valves on each one of the corners that regulates the pressure, and we punch little holes in there, kind of like a sprinkler system would in your backyard. But I think the really cool thing about it is how we actually get the water to the pipes. We had to run a hose all the way across the entire theater into the men's bathroom backstage, and then we had Busy, our ASM at the time. So every time that we get to that rain cue, Busy would have to go back there, turn the faucets on full, and there we get our running water, and that's how we got our little rain to go around there. But I also thought one really cool thing was how we stopped the rain during the show. And how do we do that, Jen?
Okay, so under each one of those pipes, there was a little like flap that we could control on the side of the stage. We had a rope, and the rope would then lower these levers that were under each one of those pipes, and each one of those levers was lined in towel, a really absorbent towel. And so Busy would first shut off the water, and it would drip a little bit, and then we'd raise those levers up, and it would really help stop the residual sprinkles from happening.
And if you saw the show, you know we couldn't completely stop the running water as it heated up or got cold. Of course, pipes expanded and contract, so we'd get little drips. So every once in a while, we had to send actors on during the blackouts to clean up little wet areas to make sure nobody slipped and fell during the production. And then to catch the water, which was also really cool, is that the actual stage was kind of raked or pitched in towards the center. So the water would hit that, run down to the inside, and then we put in a gutter system. And the gutter system would catch all that water, and then that water would run where?
Under the pit, into the pit, into the pit where all of the musicians get to play.
And also get wet during the show, because sometimes that water doesn't all go into the gutter system. So, but I love that, and thank you to Mike Higgins. A shout out to him for coming up with this ingenious idea.
The ingenious engineer that Mike Higgins is.
Super genius.
Yes. Okay, here is another question from Lynette Bachman. Thank you for this wonderful question, Lynette. I am wondering who comes up with the set designs and how they come to fruition.
That's a great question, because our designers are not always in the forefront of everything that we do. They see me, they see our music director, but they don't always get to meet our incredible designers. In case you're wondering, we have several guest designers throughout the summer season, guest scenic designers, guest lighting designers. Stephen does all of the costume designs, but for the most part throughout the season, we have a lot of people that come in and out that really help us.
We also are fortunate to have had our late artistic director Roy Hine was a brilliant scenic designer, and we have a huge library of all of his blueprints of sets that he has designed for us in the past. So when we get lucky enough to repeat a show that Roy was the artistic director for, sometimes we revisit his set designs, and we will always give him credit for that, and we love him dearly and we miss him.
Yes, we do. How the process starts in early October when we start to go through the shows. I will contact the scenic designers and I will give them ideas of kind of what I think the show is going to look like or feel like. We're going to talk about Mary Poppins today because we actually have a model that we can show you and some drawings and renderings of how that set came together. So I'd have a lot of conversations, and mostly it starts with locations, like where we go in Mary Poppins. And what were some of those locations?
Okay, so we are in the kitchen of Mary Poppins. We are in the living room of the Banks' house, sorry. We have to go to the bank. We have to go to the park. Oh, the children's bedroom. The
rooftops of London. So we had to go from the interior of a house to the rooftops of London in the round. So one of the challenging things about the round is how we're going to pull off all these giant sets and all these locations with minimal things. So we can't have, on Broadway, they actually had an entire house that went into the stage. It kind of raised and lowered so that here was your mansion, and then they could just drop it down into the floor and then bring all those rooftop pieces out and they were good to go. Well, we couldn't do any of those things. So we had to come up with some really clever and creative ways to hide the set so that we could bring it out and show it when we needed it and then make it disappear. And I credit this to David Lepore, who's our genius, one of our genius designers here. And we spent months talking about how we were going to do all of these different locations. So we started out with the home first because that's where a majority of the show takes place. So we started out with how the interior was going to look like. How were we going to do the bedrooms? How were we going to do all these things? And I'll show you on the model how we came up with the idea of keeping the house to be basically rooftops, is to be the rooms of the house. And we would pull the beds out of those rooftops, or we could move those rooftops around. They were all movable to give us different locations inside the house. If we wanted to create a room, we could move something around. And then just bring on furniture and have a nice floor treatment where we paint the floor to feel like the interior of a house. And then when we went outside, we would lose all of those things and we would just kind of bring on, for the bank, we just brought on little teller units, or we brought on, for the park scenes and stuff like that, like we had the carousel, we brought on the carousel horses, or gates to symbolize coming into that park that were kind of, that said the park logoage on it. So we would do all these things and bring all these things together without having to actually have the entire environment. It would just be suggested with these pieces and make it easily move around.
So another thing Scott has to communicate with the set designer is his job is to come up with all the movement of the show. Not only do we have to worry about the locations, but how much dance space does Scott need for the big dance numbers? What kind of blocking does he already envision for the actors? How much space do they have for that? The set designer has to take that into account as well.
Yeah, and so like for example, I wanted one rooftop to be able to go up and down it or slide down it with 3 or 4 people. So it had to be built structurally so we could move it, first of all, move it into position, and then be able to run up and down it during the actual show. Which was a lot of fun. We also had flying in Mary Poppins. That's another thing I've taken into consideration. So as she's flying, we can't have a lot of pieces in the air because she'll run into them. So here is our model that we came up with for Mary Poppins. This is our little set, as you can see here. This is looking at it from the top down, and David Lepore put together this amazing model that you could actually see inside and see how all of those houses work together. And you can see in there what the scale and the elevation looks like as far as the height and stuff goes. That's Mary Poppins flying up there, so you get the relationship of how big those pieces are. And kind of an idea of the intricacy and all the stuff that has to go into these sets. And it takes months of planning to do all this stuff. Like I said, we started in October, and this show didn't even happen until June. So we spent that entire time figuring all this stuff out, including on the fly as things got changed as we went to the opening of the production.
On the fly, no pun intended.
Yeah. Great. Our next question.
Next question. Oh gosh, this is a great question that we get from a lot of people all the time. So here is one from our Directors Club members. Why can we not do shows like Lion King, Wicked, or Hamilton, or those big blockbusters you see currently on Broadway?
It's a great question, and like she said, the Directors Clubs ask me this every year. They vote on the shows that we do, and they're always like, why can't we add these to our list? Why aren't we doing these shows? And there's a good reason why. It's because they're actually not available to license yet. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that the rental houses or the shows themselves have not released the rights of the show. So this in turn means that nobody else besides Broadway or a national tour of that show can produce it or make that show. until they release the rights. And they usually don't do that until a show closes on Broadway and stops touring. This is so that they're not competing with themselves. So they remember that they have it running on Broadway or in Chicago, or there's a tour coming around that you see maybe in South Bend or in Fort Wayne. And they don't want other theaters doing that. They want to be able to solely own the rights to that show and only produce that particular version of it, and of course make as much money off it as they possibly can. So they don't release the rights to smaller or regional theaters until they finish all of those runs.
That is a great segue to our next question. Thank you so much, Pat Newcomb, who is a Directors Club member and a longtime supporter of the Wagon Wheel Theater, for this question. Her question is, how much does it cost to do a show? Specifically, can you tell us a little bit about what the royalties are, obtaining the license to do a show, and how much that costs, Scott?
Yeah, so we were talking about royalties and rights before, and that is what you have to pay the company to actually do that production, which is different than what it costs to do the entire show. There's other factors in the cost, whether that's costumes and sets and lights and paying the actors and the orchestra and all of the pieces that go along with it. This is just the royalties that we have to pay alone for each production that we do. And again, some of them are more than others, but on average, they are $20,000 to $30,000 per show. Okay, and that means per production that we do. So for each show, they can go up depending on the shows. Disney shows are sometimes a little bit more. Other shows like Rodgers and Hammerstein's, you know, if we do Carousel or Oklahoma, they tend to be a little bit less. Or there are royalty-free shows like
Shakespeare. We went to our awesome staff member, Holly Lance, who's our Director of Operations and Human Resources gal. She does a lot of things. Thank you, Holly, for this information. She told us that the average show is roughly $8,000 to $10,000. Plus, on top of that, we have to pay 11% of our ticket sales. So that's where we get the average of roughly $20,000 to $30,000 per production.
So it's different for every show, but it is expensive. But of course, without the shows, we can't give you that great entertainment.
Here's our next question from Patricia and Carol. Scott, can you tell us how strike works? What is strike?
Strike. So strike is what we call changing over from one show to another during our summer season. So when one show ends, like for example, if we were ending Mary Poppins and then going on to Catch Me If You Can, that changeover, which means that we're changing that set from Mary Poppins over to Catch Me If You Can. Now the interesting part about this is that we have basically 3 days to do this.
3 days.
3 days. So Mary Poppins ended on a Saturday. And at that Saturday night after that show, we stayed up all night and we take down that entire set. We have to paint the floor back. We have to take all of the set down, all of those elements out, take all the lights down, put away all the costumes, all the makeups, all the props have to be put away.
All the wigs.
All the wigs have to be put away and struck. So everything has to be struck, is what we call it. That's why we call it strike, because we're taking everything down. And then we have the next day, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We have those 3 days before we have an audience again on Wednesday night to put the entire new set in. Meaning that we have to paint the floor if we need to paint the floor, or hang up all of the header pieces, which are all of the things that we put up in the air. If there's any other technical things where signs flying in, we have to do all the rigging for all of that stuff within that 3 days. A lot of things, and it happens very quickly, and we get very little sleep, or if any sleep at all, but that's okay. Again, it's so rewarding for everyone to be able to step onto that set and get transported to that world every single show.
Okay, great. Here is another question. Thank you, Cindy, and several others who asked this question. What happens if an actor gets sick or if an actor gets injured? We had to deal with this last summer a lot, actually.
Yes, we did, unfortunately. People do get sick and injured every summer season. I kind of addressed this if you want to take a look back at my casting video last week, where I kind of go through how we do our casting and how we have a very minimal cast for our summer season, basically just enough to cover every single part that we need to in each show. So when we do have an injury or a sickness, a lot of times we just have to push through it and do the show as best we can.
The show must go on.
The show must go on. So if they have a cold, if they're starting to lose their voice, or if they're not feeling well, a lot of times we will just accommodate them. If you know, if they can't be in a number because they're not feeling well, we will take them out of that specific number. Or we could, if they're having a vocal problem, tell them not to sing a specific part at a specific time. If it's an injury, that's a completely different thing. Last year we had someone break their leg. during the summer season, not during the show. Actually, it was an accident outside the theater, and they were not able to do the show. So we had to, what we do is we call a reblock, where we go through the show and we take their track, what they do in every single show, and we reassign it to somebody else. So if they moved a piece of scenery, then somebody else will get assigned to move that piece of scenery. If they did a specific dialogue or scene, I try to give it to somebody else to do during that scene. If they were just dancing, we would just kind of leave a hole. You probably wouldn't even notice it, but we'd leave a hole, or we take their partner out of that number.
And sometimes you actually need another physical body to take that place, because everyone else is stretched thin as it is, and no one else can cover part of that track. And sometimes Mr. Scott has to step in and be in a scene.
Yeah, and we do what we have to do to make sure that the show goes off with a hitch, so that you don't even notice that something is missing or something went wrong. And that's the great thing about our companies here, that they're able to be flexible enough to kind of jump in and do these things and be willing to do these things, which can, you know, at the end of the day be so crucial to what we do, and you wouldn't even notice that it's missing or know that anything was actually wrong. So kudos to our company, and kudos to our stage managers and everybody behind the scenes who work hard to fix these problems that you don't even know that they happened. All right, we have another question here.
Scott, what is the most challenging thing about directing, choreographing, doing anything in the round?
Everything. No, there are definite challenges, though. We kind of had, you know, why we saved this question for the end was because we went through a lot of things that we've gone through in some of our other questions to kind of explain the difficulties that we have to deal with in the round, as far as like sets and scenically, how we're going to deal with all these elements. When you're given a Broadway show that has a lot of locations or huge, you know, houses or huge things that we just can't do in the round. So I try to do them as minimalistically as possible, meaning that I can't build the entire house on stage, or you wouldn't be able to see. So, or we still need these things on stage to be able to transport you and our actors to these worlds that we want to go to. So that for me is always the hardest thing, is how in the round we're going to be able to do these large set or all these scenic elements. And every time I get a little nervous and a little nauseous about, you know, how much money that's going to cost, or how I'm going to be able to do all these things in 10 days and build all these things. But our amazing staff always is able to pull it off, I think, and we do it really, really well for every single show. And I'm always proud of the productions and how they end up looking. In fact, wouldn't you say that might be an advantage to working in the round, is that we are forced to keep things minimal, and therefore the costs are innately just going to be lower? Yeah, I think, you know, like Jen said, I think that's the coolest thing about our space, is that it forces us to actually be more storytellers than worried about big spectacle, like it's immersive theater. And I think that's what really makes the set really kind of goes away after a while, and it doesn't really matter how big the set is. And it challenges our creativity. It does. Which is what we love to do. Yeah. It's my favorite thing that I get to do here, is that I don't have to worry about what they did on Broadway. I can just take our version of this show and strip it down and know that we can really do whatever we want with each show that we do here, and be as creative as we want to be, and we start from a blank slate every single time, and that's really, really fun.
Hi Wagon Wheelers, Kira Lace Hawkins here in the rehearsal hall of Wagon Wheel Theater to take you through another theater game. Today we're going to learn Yes and. This game is the foundation of improv theater. Improv is short for improvisation. This type of theater is not scripted. Part of the entertainment value comes from the fact that you know that actors are thinking of crazy things to say on the spot. Yes and is the foundation, because if someone offers up an idea in an improv scene and it's met with no, your scene is over. You need to have this idea of yes and in your head in order to accept and agree with what your scene partner has come up with, and then offer up the next idea to make sure the scene continues. So in order to play this game, you need 2 players, and you need to agree on who will offer the first idea. They offer up their idea, which hopefully gives you some idea of where you are and what you're doing, and then the second player answers their phrase with yes and continues the story on. In order to help me put this into action, I've invited one of my friends to play this theater game with me for you. So here I am with my good friend Jennifer Dow, and we are going to do a demonstration of this game, Yes and.
Oh my gosh, Kira, I'm so excited to go to the aquarium tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think the first thing that I'm gonna look at is the big beluga whale.
Yes! Oh, and the beluga whales remind me a lot of like the bottlenose dolphins. I hope they have some bottlenose dolphins.
Yes. And oh, here we are. Oh, look at all of the fish.
Yes, and look, manta rays.
Yes, and wait, is that a crack?
Yes. And there's water coming into the floor.
Yes, and it's shaking. The whole wall is shaking.
Yes, and maybe we ought to find an escape route somewhere.
But did you just feel that raindrop?
Yes. And look over there. I think I see a tornado forming.
Yes, and we don't have a car. We are on foot in a field.
Yes, and I don't see any farmhouses anywhere. Yes.
Yes, and it's coming right toward us. Where's Dorothy's house?
Yes, and Toto too.
Oh my gosh, it's 5 minutes to places, Jen, and I do not have my hair ready.
Yes, and you forgot your microphone again.
Yes, and I have to go get my microphone.
Yes, and I'll get your hair stuff ready and
Thank you. Yes,
stuff
and,
for you.
oh please.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yes, but I'm playing that other character today.
Yes, and can you remember all those lines for that scene in Act 2?
Yes, and I practiced all night last night.
Yes, and I can be your scene partner. I can help you run through those lines right now.
Okay. Yes, and okay. Hello, it's nice to see you today.
Yes, and...
So that's yes and. You can play with your family, you can play with friends, and practice this idea of good improv, building off of each other in order to create a great improvisational scene. Thanks so much. See you next week.
sit there walking. No time to talk or gawk. There's never time for anything else. It's always time for tea. Move down! Never time for anything else. It's always time for tea. Move down! Why won't I stop? Tweedledee and tweedledum rattle. Oh, that is quite exciting, but I have no time for battles. No time. Such exciting fighting. There's never time for anything else. It's always time for tea. Look down! We go in a tree, always close at hand. Never lose the wonder of Wonderland. Somewhere in a tree, your heart will want to go and find a place where you can grow. Find a place where you can
Join us next week for workshops where I'm going to do a dance combination. And my plan is to do something from an audition combination to see how you will do if you had to audition for the Wagon Wheel Theater and do my dance combination.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Scott Michaels choreography.
Yeah. So join us next week for more fun.